Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And you know, as we move into 2020, the emperor's got no clothes. We're talking about Cyril Ramaphosa. He's totally in a delusional state. And I'm going to give him a historical reality check about what is going on. One of the biggest fears of blacks in South Africa is that they would prove white racists right. When white racists point to the obvious lack of IQ of blacks, the lack of any meaningful achievements and contributions to modern civilization, then they want to start shouting about the evils of colonialism and apartheid over the last 350 years. Problem is that since whites came into contact with blacks in South Africa, we have reminded them of their inferiority. They looked at the wheel of our wagon and went, wow, why have we not thought of something like that? And so it was with others, like white inventions like scissors, mirrors, pocket knives, tobacco pipes, etc. It all reminded blacks that whites had something magical, something that made them appear superior to blacks. And, of course, this is where the kicker comes in when it comes to the South African Human Rights Commission, because they don't seem to be able to charge a black person for racist attacks, because the whole basis of racism is another group seeing the other group as inferior. And if the South African Human Rights Commission are unable to charge a black person for racism, then what they're doing is they're actually confirming the fact that there is an IQ differential and the black people are inferior to the white. Now, I'm not saying they are. There are a lot of very, very smart black people in the world, a great deal. But by implication, that is what the South African Human Rights Commission are doing. And by doing that, they are actually a racist organization, and that is self-evident when you look at some of the decisions they've made. The black thought that by possessing all this magical gadgets of whites, that somehow they would then become equal to whites or also obtain this something, this white magic. When they could not trade it with whites, then they were willing to steal it or even kill for it. But over the years, they have realized that no amount of stealing, killing, or raping could take away the feeling of inferiority away. In fact, their behavior made this feeling worse. They saw themselves in how they behaved, and they shamed themselves for who they were and their behavior, and their feelings of inferiority became even worse. No amount of education could take this feeling of inferiority away, as can be seen from the weird speeches and writings of Thabo Mbeki, most notably the one at the funeral of Sarah Baartman. Instead of looking into the mirror and accepting what he saw, Thabo resented what he saw and looked for the fault in the person who made and handed him the mirror. It was everyone else's fault except blacks themselves. And maybe he had a point, for whites cannot help that they are whites, and blacks did not make themselves either. To say that blacks cannot govern a modern civilization is not racist. It is a fact. It is as much racist as to say a horse cannot climb a tree. It is a fact. And of course, this is all self-evident if you look what the ANC government have done to South Africa in just 25 years. There is not a single well-run black country in the world today. The Liberals will quickly say Botswana, when it is in fact common knowledge that Botswana is mentored and run by Anglo-American Mining Company, as Nigeria is run by Shell Oil. And another classic example of what we're talking about here is every municipality in South Africa is a complete disaster, except for one. You know who it is? It's Orania. run exclusively by a white committee. Now, it's quite clear that this is the situation. The simple failure of blacks is first observed at personal hygiene, then noticed in the abode where the person stays. Then one has to ask the question, if a person cannot even look after himself and his immediate environment, keep it clean at least, then how will he be able to run a farm or a small town? As I said, look at the municipalities. Disgusting. Is it then not absurd to expect blacks to run a whole white, westernized and civilized country? That's the kicker. They haven't got a clue. Liberals believe that it is possible for blacks to do so. Just a bit more education, just a bit more mentoring and a bit more money, then blacks will be able to do it. Throwing money at a problem always seems to be the Liberals' favourite way of solving issues. What these Liberals forget is that they are admitting the failures of blacks. They are admitting that blacks are incapable of uplifting themselves. Now, I should say here that I'm not talking about everybody, I'm talking about a large percentage of the black population. And unfortunately, that extends into the leadership of the ANC government in South Africa. Blacks who constantly cry about colonialism and apartheid that oppress them actually admit to the superiority of the whites, because if whites were not superior to blacks, they would not have been able to dominate them for the last 350 years of colonialism. The only solution that blacks see is to undo this 350 years of colonialism. By that, it is meant that whites should leave behind everything that they have built with no compensation, all their gadgets such as cars and airplanes, and those whites should leave the continent or be killed, but most of all, that whites should take their mirrors with them. Blacks do not like to see themselves in it. Would that take the inferiority complex of blacks away? Certainly not. We live in a modern, global world. Blacks will continue to have contact with whites and Orientals and will constantly be reminded of their own inferiority complex. Somewhere along the line, blacks are going to have to face the reality and start to accept themselves and be honest with themselves. That a horse simply cannot climb a tree. Horses can do a lot of other useful things, but climbing trees is not what they are good at. All the proof is there in the world. Haiti has been independent for 200 years. Liberia, which has never been colonized and never had apartheid, and which has a constitutional model of the American one. Ethiopia, been independent for 4,000 years, and which has never been colonized or had apartheid, are all failed states. Throughout sub-Saharan Africa, you see the same thing: famine, civil war, disease, death, chaos. Look at Zimbabwe today. Even when there are no more whites in the country, they will still be blaming whites for their own savage and uncivilized behavior. In South Africa, the liberal experiment has failed as well. By that, I mean their expectations of the ANC and Thabo Mbeki. They thought that if they could have their own Western-educated, noble savage at the helm, that things would somehow work out. Liberals thought that Thabo, backed up by the most liberal constitution in the world, would somehow govern successfully and without corruption, and South Africa would prosper. For years, Liberals have fought the system of apartheid, the system of Bantustans and black homelands, where blacks could rule themselves. But what do we see today? What was the result of their great liberal experiment? South Africa has turned into one giant Bantustan. The truth is that the period of time where South Africa had the biggest bloom, the biggest economy, and the best standard of living for everybody on the entire African continent was during apartheid, most notably during the time of Verwoerd. Liberals and blacks believed that they could do better. After 17 years of experimenting with black rule, South Africa is a monumental failure and getting worse by the day. So what comes next? We have tried Bantustans. We have tried an all hold hand and sing Kumbaya, multicultural rainbow nation. It all failed. Shall we try Whitestans now? Shall we create an Afrikanistan or Boeristan? Shall we create an English stan? What about a coloured stan and an Indian stan? How far should we turn the clock back? To 1994 and renegotiate? To 1948 and accept Smuts' model rather than the National Party model? Or shall we go back to 1910 and recreate the two Boer republics and the two British colonies? Or shall we go back even further to 1652 before Jan van Riebeeck came to the Cape? Oh, hang on. The blacks were practicing genocide back then, in Shaka's defecating and murdering millions of each other. But it was somehow okay, because there were no whites holding up the mirror to them. My guess would be that if Shaka was not killed by his own half-brother, that there would only be one black nation in South Africa today, namely the Zulus. There would not be any Xhosas or Swazis or Sothos. Thanks to colonialism and apartheid, these people, along with their cultures and their religions, have survived. But the 350 years of colonialism is in any case a myth and a lie. Whites were in the Cape for 120 years already before they met the first blacks, namely the Xhosas on the Fish River. The ZAR and the Orange Free State were only established in 1854 and 1857 respectively. Before that, blacks fully ruled themselves and were never under white rule. The countries of Botswana, Lesotho and Swaziland were British colonies and became independent since the 1960s, and during the 1970s, the homeland of Transkei, Ciskei, Bophuthatswana, Venda became independent. So in effect, blacks should not speak out about the legacy of 350 years of colonialism when it was only about 100 years. During that 100 years of colonialism and apartheid, blacks have experienced the greatest leap forward in their civilization. Today they wear modern clothes, use cars, television. What part of colonialism do they want to undo first? Blacks should finally admit that colonialism and apartheid benefited everybody in South Africa. There is no shame in it, just like there is no shame in admitting that the Germanic tribes, the Gauls and the ancient Britons, all benefited from Roman civilization. The difference is that the ancient Britons, Gauls and Germans embraced the advantages that Roman civilization brought and built on it, and improved themselves. Blacks want to undo 350 years of history and civilization. How can they ever go forward in South Africa if they keep on wanting to go back? How does one explain this logic? L factor. Missing in action. Alright guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video, please share this video, and above all, stay safe.